What is the difference between conceptual knowledge and conceptualism? Or perhaps a better way to ask the question is, if I assert the existence of conceptual knowledge, does that oblige me to be a conceptualist? First, let's clarify. In Thomistic writings, you may see concepts, ideas, or mental images. All three terms are synonymous. To understand concepts, we need to go back to the beginning of what we mean by human sensation, or better, how it takes place. Knowledge of everything comes through the senses, as we know. And sensation is a psychological experience that is rooted in the physical. Whenever we sense something, we first come to knowledge of singulars, individual things. Sense differs from intellect and reason because the latter are of universals, which are everywhere and always, but sense is of singulars, which are here and now. Sense knowledge is the coordinated and coherent response to an external stimulus informing us that we are confronting a particular object in the real world. Senses are sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Easily identify the external senses. Some people are not aware of the existence of the internal senses. The internal senses are the common sense, imagination, memory, and cogitative sense. While the external senses take in information, the internal senses are immaterial powers of the rational soul that complete the sensing process. Let's look further at the common sense. D.Q. McInerney describes the common sense as the whole-making sense. It takes all the information received through the external senses and puts them together to make a unified picture of the thing being sensed. So it takes what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're tasting, all the sense information, it takes it together and forms a unified picture called the percept. Percept is a mental image of a material thing and therefore is described as a sense image. But keep in mind the percept is temporary. It only lasts as long as one is sensing an object. Now the imagination. Though the percept formed by the common sense is a temporary mental image, the imagination makes permanent images. The image produced in the imagination is not as vivid as the percept, but it remains stored in the imagination after the object is no longer being sensed. While looking at or sensing something, the imagination is taking a picture and storing it for later. Sense memory. Memory is also a picture-making power, but the images made by the memory are unlike the images of the imagination because they are always images of the past. The memory is storing its images while things are being perceived so that we can remember those perceptions later. Without the influence of memory, each perception would constitute an entirely novel experience for us, the consequence of which would be a total lack of continuity in our conscious lives. We won't focus much on the fourth, the cogitative sense, but it's also known as the associative sense. It's almost like instinct in animals. It provides us with an instinctive or quasi-instinctive response to various stimuli in our environment. Now that we've reviewed sensation, we talk about the intellectual power. In the ongoing analysis and synthesis that our intellects do with sense information, all those activities that the intellect engages in are based on three operations: apprehension, judgment, and reasoning. Let's look at those in depth. It's the act of the intellect by which we grasp through the medium of a concept or idea the nature of a thing. Simple apprehension is the act of the intellect by which we know the natures of things through the medium of concepts. It's a process by which, in our intellectual regard for any object, we mentally set aside certain aspects of it, for example, all those things which are peculiar to the object just as an individual, and focus our attention on the nature of the object, that in the object which identifies it in relation to other objects of the same kind. Ponder this crucial point. from D.Q. McInerney's text. Abstraction is the foundation for all human knowledge. If we were not capable of abstraction, true intellectual knowledge would be impossible for us. We would know individuals, but we would not know how individuals relate essentially to one another. Every dog we encountered would not be a dog at all, for we would have no idea for it and hence no name for it. We would know it as a physical thing, but we would not know it as this or that kind of physical thing. Its inner reality would be closed to us. Our knowledge would stop at surfaces. It is through abstraction that we are able not only to grasp the nature of individuals, but to form a coherent picture of literally the whole of reality, for a knowledge of natures provides us with a knowledge of the relations that obtain among natures. Again, simple apprehension is the act of the intellect by which we apprehend the natures of things by means of concepts. How does this happen? The senses do their job, as we discussed earlier, and the result is the production of a sense image. This sense image, called a phantasm, is passed on to the intellect. A specific power of the intellect, called the agent intellect, illuminates the phantasm, which is the image of a particular, and strips away all of its materiality, and therefore all of its particularity. So the agent intellect does the important work of stripping the form out of all of its particulars or accidents and leaving it with the substantial form of the perceived object. Once the agent intellect has done its job of abstracting the essential nature from the phantasm, the power of the intellect referred to as the possible intellect forms a concept or idea. Let's review this whole process of forming concepts or ideas. The external senses take in sense information. The common sense puts the information together to form a percept. The percept is augmented by the work of the imagination, memory, and cogitative sense, resulting in the complete phantasm. The phantasm is illuminated by the agent intellect, which abstracts the essential nature. The essential nature is passed on to the possible intellect that makes a concept or idea from it. All of these steps are spelled out carefully here, but it all takes place instantaneously, which is really remarkable. The concept or idea has its point of origin in the images of the senses, the imagination, and the memory, but is nevertheless something entirely distinct and more noble. This distinction is crucial. The senses present things only in their exterior and material aspect, whereas through the concept we grasp the mode of being hidden under the sensible image. Through the concept we grasp what a thing is, its quiddity or essence, although in a confused and as yet imperfect way. The concept or mental word is not that which is known when our intellect is at work. It is the means whereby intellection takes place. And what we know by that means is the very nature or intelligible determination of an actually or possibly existing thing. A concept is a sign, vicar, or likeness of the object. Ideas originate in the mind much in the same way that manufactured products originate in factories. Those products truly come forth from those factories, and were there no factories, there would be no products. However, the factories would not be able to produce and send forth their products in the first place if there were no raw materials which were coming into the factories. The situation is comparable to what happens with the human intellect. The intellect would not be able to produce ideas if it were not first supplied with the raw material which enables it to do so, and that raw material is the knowledge which is presented to the intellect by sensation. And that knowledge is possible in turn because of the physical stimuli coming from the external world. To be more precise, the intellect needs phantasms, the complete sense image, in order to produce an idea. The traditional way of referring to the generation of ideas as conceiving and to ideas themselves as concepts is quite revealing. The mind is not capable of parthenogenesis. In order to give birth to ideas, it must first be impregnated. Now, ideas really exist. They can't exist as substantial realities, but they are qualities of the mind. And ideas which exist dependently, that is accidentally, still have real existence because, accidental existence is real existence. Our minds conceive ideas, but remember, ideas or concepts are the result of encountering real things in the world. So a crucial question arises: do I know concepts? Are concepts the object of my knowledge? Intellectual cognition is an interpretation of reality by means of abstract thought objects used as predicates in judgment. Reality is given through sense data, and in these the intellect apprehends its abstract thought objects. Furthermore, the mental product of the conception process, the verbum mentale, the entire intellectual modification whereby the intellect is cognitively assimilated to the reality, is not itself the object of which the intellect becomes aware. It is that which gives the reality an esse ideale, which constitutes the reality present to intellect. So let's break that down and make it a little bit more understandable. So I know concepts, but more importantly, in the act by which I know them, I also know by means of them real things that exist in the world. So the primary object of my knowledge is not concepts. It is the thing which is represented by the concept. The signal difference between the sense image, the phantasm, and the intellectual image, the concept, is that the first always pertains to particulars and the second always pertains to universals. All ideas by definition are universals, and therein lies their immanent practicality. With ideas, our knowledge soars above the particular, the most limited picture possible, and is established within the biggest of pictures, the picture which contains all. Conceptualism. Conceptualism is the theory that universals are real, but they exist only in the mind. Exist. The answer to the question is yes, of course they do. Next question, how do they exist? They exist as mental constructs, ideas in the mind, by which we have true knowledge of the world in which we live, and without which, we repeat, no knowledge would be possible. But if universals exist as ideas in the mind, they are able to so exist because they owe their mental existence to something external to the mind. A universal idea is an idea about a nature. Universals themselves do not have substantial existence, but they would not have any meaning as accidental existence, as ideas in the mind, were it not for the substantial existence to which they refer. Background that we've been covering, it finally leads us back to our initial question about the difference between conceptual knowledge and conceptualism. If I assert the existence of conceptual knowledge, does that oblige me to be a conceptualist? The simple answer is no. Remember that the agent intellect abstracts from the phantasm, taking away all of the particulars, such that what is left is the form or nature of the thing. And then the possible intellect is able to take from that and form a concept or idea in the mind. So we do believe in conceptual knowledge, but that doesn't make us conceptualists, because the conceptualist thinks that universals only have existence in the mind, in that concept, that there really is no such thing as a universal outside of the mind. But as hopefully I've been able to demonstrate to you, the existence of universals is crucial. It has to be something more than just what the mind imposes on the things that it perceives. They actually have real existence. And that's why we can group things together as sharing in the same nature. It's not just what my mind does to the information I've got in my head that I perceived through my senses. It's actually something that has real existence outside of my mind.